So welcome to, again, the new community conversations hosted by our Autodesk community. Our community conversations are new live virtual events designed to allow you to gain expertise, connect with leaders, and grow your community network. My name is Kimberly Furman, and I will be your community host. We are joined by the legendary and ever-talented David Butts and a whole host of panelists today discussing the Revit perspective, how project information modeling revolutionizes design. So David, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe who you have with us today?
Yeah, I'm the chief cook and bottle washer. No, actually, I'm the engineering technology manager from Gannett Fleming. I've been with the company for a little over 10 years, coming up on 11 years, but for 13 years before that, I was an Autodesk reseller. I've been a part of the Expert Elite program, and Katinka can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I think 7 years now. So a long time with the program and just excited to be a part of it. I'm actually based in a little town called Supply, North Carolina, which is in between Wilmington and Myrtle Beach, but I've been dealing with Autodesk products since 1985, so I'm an official old guy. And along with us today, you want to go ahead and advance that up. Let's talk about our panelists. Sure. I got my buddy Matt Dillon here, who I've known for many decades, probably longer than he'd like to admit. And Matt, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit real quick.
Sure. I'm an old guy just like you. I've been dealing with Autodesk and Autodesk products since 1986, so you've got a year on me. And I think you and I first met back in the late 90s, perhaps. Late 90s, something like that. I'm a director of architecture engineering services at Applied Software Technologies. Prior to that, I was with another Autodesk partner, DC-CAD, which later rebranded as Inceptia, and we were acquired by Applied Software back in 2015.
Awesome. So my next up is my buddy Richard Benning, and Richard and I got to meet each other a few years ago while we were working on some special programs for Autodesk. So how about you introduce yourself, Richard?
I'm Richard Benning, Director of BIM Technology at Nelson Worldwide. I'm based out of Georgia in the Atlanta area. Been using Autodesk products since 1984. Member of the Autodesk Developer Network, former board of directors for Autodesk User Group International. And I've used products, AutoCAD, AutoCAD Architecture, Architectural Desktop, Land Development Desktop, the whole 9 yards all the way up through Revit, the current product line.
Awesome. Another old guy like me. Next up is Mr. Eric Wing, who I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of years ago at the same type of conference that Richard and I were working on. Eric, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks. Well, it's nice that I'm actually not the oldest guy in the room, which I haven't been able to say that in a long time now. But I'm the BIM director at CNS Companies. We're headquartered in Syracuse, New York. We have offices across the country. They make fun of us because we're the smallest city and we're the headquarters. But I started using Revit, wow, in the early 90s, or I'm sorry, AutoCAD in the early 90s, and it's started off my career talking people out of hand drafting. I never meant to be a BIM person, but that just kind of became my niche, talking people out of stuff they're comfortable with.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, because now we have the other side of the team. We talked to some of our legends in here. Now we want to talk about some of the Autodesk people, and these are a lot of guys that I've known for many, many years. We'll start off with Mr. Ian Malloy.
Great, thanks, David. Hi, everybody. Yeah, Ian Malloy. I'm one of the product managers for Revit, focused on MEP and building performance analysis at Autodesk. Yeah, I don't know. I've been using Autodesk products since in college in the 90s, right? So you guys have a few years on me. Yeah, great to be here.
And so next up, we have Mr. Martin Schmidt, who I've known for many, many decades as well. And he's had to tolerate me pestering the daylights out of him over Revit and AutoCAD MEP for years. So Martin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so also a product manager here at Autodesk, working on Revit as well as our fabrication products for MEP. I'm based in San Antonio, Texas. Yet Matt and I have not had a chance to get together for quite a while due to obvious situations. But interestingly, I first met Matt when I was recently out of college at my first job here in San Antonio, and the company I was working for was getting Autodesk building systems training. So that dates us quite a ways back. So.
Yep.
So another official old guy. Last up on the list here is Mr. Harris. Tim, why don't you introduce yourself now?
Thanks. So Tim Yaris, I am the product manager for Civil 3D, as well as some of the other companion products with Civil 3D. So grading optimization, Project Explorer, all those good things. I feel like I'm kind of the new guy here. I've only been with Autodesk since 2006. So, but the whole time, 15 years worth on the Civil 3D product team and a bunch of different roles and everything. And so talking to a whole lot of expert elites and a whole lot of customers over the years. And it's always good to be on one of these panels.
And he actually knows what Softdesk is, which is another reason why.
I do. Yeah, I was kind of there for the overlap between Softdesk and AutoCAD and Autodesk and all that kind of good stuff.
All right, cool.
All right.
So let's hand it back over to Kim and let her go through her stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys, you guys are dating yourself, but I can also date myself as well, because I actually started using, board drafting way back in the early 90s. Yes. And started AutoCAD release 10 with my career. So I'm not going to ever admit my age, but you can kind of guess. All right, so before we begin, we have just a few ground rules. Everyone's line is muted to reduce background noise. We do invite you to keep your camera turned on if you're comfortable, so we can get as close to a physical environment in our new virtual world. The conversation should be exactly that, and it's going to be a lively conversation, I can tell by already. Use your Zoom raise hand function, and our moderator will unmute you to ask a question. David will also be taking questions throughout, and you can use your the chat window to type questions in at any time. We're going to use those questions kind of to help guide the discussion. This session is being recorded, and it will be emailed to all the attendees and also uploaded to the Community Conversations website. By participating in this session, you do consent to being recorded. And I keep forgetting I have control. Just quickly, our safe harbor statement. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but if we make any forward-looking statements, I don't want you to make any purchase decisions based on those statements. If you are making purchasing decisions, please look at the software in its state today and that alone. In addition, David Butts, Matt Dillon, Richard Binning, and Eric Wing are independent of Autodesk Incorporated and Autodesk's subsidiaries. All activities, advice, and opinions expressed here should in no way be linked to Autodesk Incorporated or its subsidiaries. Autodesk does not endorse and has no responsibility for the actions of these persons or the content, advice, or information provided by today's presenters. I was really trying not to laugh through that one.
That's a smart move.
Yeah, very smart move.
Community conversations provide opportunities for engineers, designers, artists, and makers to meet in a safe, live, virtual setting to share expertise, get to know leaders in your field, and grow your community network. The sessions are always supported by Autodesk community managers, such as myself, to help guide conversation, feed important insights back from the community to Autodesk, and to support participants in getting connected to the expertise you need. And now I'm going to hand it over to David.
Okay, so let's see if we
I'll
get.
give you remote control.
And just wanted to point out a couple of pictures in here. Right now, you can see some of the other community managers with Chris Benner and Wendy Lim. Great people involved in the community from Autodesk. They've been a huge asset for Autodesk, especially joining the team in the last couple of years. So make sure you thank these guys, because the relationship that Autodesk has with you guys right now is really built on the work that these folks are doing. So just make sure you reach out to them and tell them thank you for setting this stuff up today.
Awesome. Thank you, David.
Let me see if I can get this. So we want to talk a little bit. We kind of kick this thing off a little and talk about where we came from and origins of what the workflows were. And I'm an old guy, man. I've been, like I said, I've been doing this for a long time. And yeah, Danya, I know you've been doing it for 2 years longer than me. Stay quiet back over there. So, but the fun part about this is that we really came out of this. We were all young and we were all learning how this stuff worked. And we were really excited about how all these tools were operating. And so we really want to look at the evolution of where this programming came from and how, how we got to where we are. So I'm trying to get it to evolve. So we're going to be asking these questions today, like where were you when this acquisition happened? And then how did object-oriented programming affect what you did? And then when we talk about the acquisition of Revit and when did it take off for your clients and projects, this whole relationship of Autodesk as a company moving in through Softdesk and then acquiring Revit Technology Corporation. This is kind of the model for how BIM got evolved. And so I wanted to reach back a little bit in history. And in 1997, I got invited to the very first architectural desktop gunslinger. And this was in Henniker, New Hampshire. And for those of you who didn't know, don't get excited. This was it. This was Dave Arnold's main place of business, where they were writing architectural desktop, and a group of about 12 of them on that very first object-oriented programming beta team. And in that little building in the back there, we were all sitting in a conference room looking at how object-oriented programming worked. And upstairs were two guys from Japan. It was the first example I saw of power programming. One guy standing over another shoulder with code. And it was great. And, you know, we had a blast out there. We got to meet a lot of great people. You can see a few familiar faces out there. It's like Bill Glenny's in the corner, and Matt, who else was here? We had
Chad Ames is sitting over there at the other end of the table.
yeah, and some of these guys have been involved with Autodesk for decades, you know, and they've had a huge impact on how this all has evolved. So I want to ask you guys first, and we're going to start with Matt, Richard, and Eric. Where were you guys when this stuff took place? I mean, what were you doing, and where were you in your career?
I'll go first. You know, I'll speak to the Softdesk. Autodesk, I started with version 2.18, and I remember when Softdesk was DCA civil engineering software. So it goes back that far, and it was, you know, the manual was in a loose leaf binder, et cetera. And then years later, of course, Softdesk came out with this concept called AECX. So I'm sure you remember that. That was really my first exposure to object-oriented programming, because they had a version of AutoCAD basically where you could put a door in a wall and it would automatically break the wall. And if you took the door out, the wall would fix itself. It was amazing, right? If you moved a column grid, the columns would actually follow the grid. If you had a civil engineering model, you could change the surface and the cross sections would automatically update. I mean, this was revolutionary stuff back then.
Oh, yeah.
That's what, speculation on my part, but I think that's what led to Autodesk purchasing Softdesk and ultimately led to the development of architectural desktop, land desktop, and ultimately what we see now is AutoCAD architecture, Civil 3D, et cetera. And then, of course, the Revit acquisition in what, 2000, was it 2003, 2004? I don't remember the exact year.
I would say it was 2003, wasn't it? Somewhere around there.
Somewhere around there. Yeah. And of course, we all know what happened from there. Revit soon became the predominant application for anything above ground, right? For any kind of building design.
So Richard, where were you when all this was going on?
So I was recently out of the Navy. I was in the Navy Seabees learning hands-on construction. And I was at my first professional architectural job, and the company was actually an integrated design build firm. So we had deployed land development desktop, we had architectural desktop, we had all the Softdesk tools, and we were working hard and trying to fix things that the software managed things very well, but it still moved lines around and symbolic representations of things. So if somebody edited a file that was not part of the Softdesk application, then we had to go back in and fix things and turn off layers and correct things. So learning the ins and outs of how it all worked, and then seeing the progression to architectural desktop where it's a true object. And so you place a door in a wall and it fixes it. You take the door out and it fixes the wall. That's all fabulous stuff, and we were excited to be part of it.
I think Carol Bartz used to refer to it back in those days as ready, fire, aim. I think that was one of the jokes that we used to talk about, was the development during that time was ready, fire, aim, figure out what we did wrong. How about you, Eric?
Yeah, you know, similar to Richard, I was back with the Softdesk thing. I was a construction foreman, you know, at the time. I moved over to a structural engineering firm, you know, and as a side hustle, I did architectural millwork, production drawings. And that's the thing, I'm a production guy, but I remember the acquisition of Revit, because one thing I got really good at was writing list routines to make AutoCAD, you know, draw a line, make it a certain layer, you know, cut the lines in and put a piece of freaking text in there. You know, first beam I drew in Revit, I was like, yeah, I'm going to use this now. And, you know, that's where it started with, like I said, I had someone next to me who loved AutoCAD, you know, another person next to me who's drafting, physically drafting. Like, all right, you know, you should really see how this program works. And we have architects that we're overwriting files, we're, you know, not coordinating with them. So it's, you know, I caught it right when Revit came out. Certainly it wasn't quite developed at the time, but I could just draw a beam and have text go on there and change the beam and the text changes. So that's all I needed to be sold.
So it's really funny. You're talking about all this stuff we do, and I'm one of those guys that wrote hundreds of Lisp routines. And then we got all these Autodesk guys sitting over here looking at this going, man, what do we need to do? I mean, we've acquired Softdesk. Now what? What happens? I mean, Martin, Tim, Ian, what happened back in those days? Speak on Martin first, because I know he was around when all this was going on. You got to unmute yourself there, buddy.
You're muted, buddy.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, obviously some of that predates me. You know, I mean, I came on board into Autodesk prior to Revit being released, but it had already been acquired. They had already started the development of the MEP functionality, and I was actually coming into it from the consulting organization. So I wasn't on the development team. I didn't come into the product management role that I'm in now, but I came in from the consulting organization. And at that time, you know, they were still in the process of like building families, building duct fitting families and all those sorts of things. So I got my hands dirty, you know, while I wasn't on site with customers, I was working on those sorts of things and kind of getting a sense of where things were going, but, you know, not actively involved in the development process itself. But that was always kind of the interesting side of it, is in being in a consulting capacity and being on site with customers and understanding the challenges. And my background is in engineering. I'm a degreed and licensed engineer, though my license is lapsed, but that was my world, right? Is understanding what engineers need to do and trying to communicate that back to the team of like, you know, what it is that we need to move the products forward. And so that's where, you know, I got that interest in the opportunity to actually join the organization in the development capacity. But, you know, it's certainly an evolutionary process of looking at, you know, where the industry is, you know, from a 2D documentation standpoint to, you know, trying to turn that around into, you know, outcome-based design that we're trying to get into now. So.
Awesome. And Ian, you were coming around about the same time, weren't you?
Yeah, similar kind of thing. Well, I'll put it is that I first came across ADT while I was actually in college studying engineering. And while I loved engineering, I kind of wanted more of it. So I picked up a part-time job actually at a reseller. You can tell by my accent, I'm from Ireland, right? And it was a local reseller there selling AutoCAD. So most people had AutoCAD, but ADT was sort of starting to appear. And so I had some of experience then, but I don't think I kind of knew enough back then to I could kind of see what the difference was, but it wasn't like, it just wasn't a big thing at the time then. Fast forward a few years then, when the Revit acquisition happened, I was at IES, you know, the building performance analysis company. And yeah, obviously the meaning of Revit at that point was that, hey, you know, we're able to get a 3D model that you can use instead of like disconnected sort of AutoCAD drawing. So it obviously had great meaning, and there was a really high bar with getting going with ADT, and it just wasn't really scaling. But of course, Revit sort of provided an easier on-ramp to do that kind of thing for most people, even though it had other limitations. But, you know, because my background had been involved in a lot of sort of analysis where you'd always needed a 3D model of some form, even if it was just a wireframe strawman thing, you know, both ADT and Revit provided that opportunity to get to that starting point a lot sooner than you could from an AutoCAD drawing or from a disconnected set of AutoCAD drawings and sections and things like that. So yeah, that was my kind of journey into this. But from my perspective, Revit kind of quickly overtook, you know, any discussion around ADT. So yeah, it was interesting.
Right. Tim, I'm going to start with you first. I want to go ahead and keep us moving along in here. I want to get on to the next topic, because really this kind of comes into play because we're starting to look at how we incorporate everything in a project. It wasn't the thing about Softdesk back in those days and where we were starting from, especially with things like, you know, going from plan-centric to model-centric design, especially on the civil side of things. you know, because there were really silos that were existing back in the day. We had architectural desktop, we had Softdesk and land development desktop and MAP and all these other programs. But this is where things were really starting to change in here. And so we started talking about the description of the act, BIM really being the act of building something, not so much the physical building itself. And I think that's where a lot of people got hung up. And so now we're starting to move into this cloud-based modeling, you know, with Revit Server and then BIM 360 Teams and then Autodesk Docs. And you got some examples of how we took it from like a water treatment plant to go to something that you can actually see on your phone. You can do client presentations of a rail station. But really on the civil side, I mean, think about this for a second. I mean, how did people overcome their objections and issues with this evolution? Because really, we were all silos. Everybody was working independent of each other. Nobody really knew what was going on the other side of the fence. So what about from your side?
Well, like I said, I joined in 2006, and so it was just as Civil 3D was just coming to be, and we still had Land Desktop in play and everything. And so it was kind of a cool thing to be part of, just kind of watching Civil 3D really come into play and seeing that evolve into the object-oriented modeling, and just seeing how customers kind of, it was a little bit of rough going at first with Civil 3D and everything. Just the first couple of releases just weren't as ready for prime time as we wanted them to be, of course. But I mean, it's new software. But yeah, so it's been really cool to see kind of at that point that evolution from Civil 3D becoming what it is, and seeing people get excited about it and the passion behind it and everything. And then now starting to see it really come into play with just kind of the next steps of, like you said, just going into the cloud, having greater collaboration with project teams, as well as, I mean, just setting the stage now for even better and better collaboration just across disciplines. It's just been just awesome to be a part of.
And that's true. I mean, if you're coming through that stage, it is easy to get excited, but you still have a lot of objections. I'm kind of opening this back up to Matt and Eric and Richard. How did you overcome those objections? I mean, you look at something like this right now and what we were trying to do. And I always love the quote, well, we've always done it this way. I always want to beat people over that quote. It's like, don't do that. But, you know, and we also had this, you know, the best thing about CAD was you can change it anytime, anything at any time. But the worst thing was you could change it. So you weren't really modeling. It kind of took us away from the design aspect. So how did you guys overcome these objections and issues as we started evolving through BIM? What did you do?
Well, it's definitely been a challenge. And in some cases, it's still a challenge. You know, I was around when we went from manual drafting to CAD, and all that really involved was learning a new tool. The process was still pretty much the same. It was still 2D drafting. The rules of geometry are the rules of geometry. So that's a relatively easy transition. But when we went from 2D drafting to model-based design and then on to BIM, that's a change in thought process. It's disruptive and it's difficult to get people to accept. It just takes, for me, really, it amounted to just patience, right? Just keep preaching the message, and eventually people started coming around. It started gaining momentum, and now we're at a point, I think, where at least in some disciplines, architecture for sure, it's pretty much self-sustaining at this point. But it took a while.
Oh yeah.
Sure. I think a big key to getting people to change is to celebrate those little efficiencies, to celebrate those wins. Yeah. When you can show them how in this software you can save yourself 5 minutes, or you can go home at 5 o'clock, so you're not there until 9 o'clock trying to process these things the way you used to do them. Now it's more automated. You can get a better product out in less time. Celebrate those things and build them up through that process.
Cool.
Yeah, I think with me, I would just stamp my feet and have a temper tantrum. That's all you know, but finding that doesn't work. You know, I have objections and issues too. You know, if anyone knows me, I'm pretty critical of the product, although I've built my career on it. So what I found is, you know, to convince someone to use software, the software has to work, right? They have to have confidence in stamping a set of drawings that at least look like they used to look. What I decided I needed to do is just get out ahead of it it's, get into projects and make sure that I can answer as many questions before they come up as possible, or try to avoid the questions if they even come up. And from there, it's communication. It's, BIM got oversold. I still think you can't have a project without a basic project kickoff meeting. You can't neglect communication, and I find that sometimes that communication is neglected, and that's where stuff goes off the rails, right? So then I just have a temper tantrum and stomp my feet.
So it's kind of funny, and it's another reason why I wanted the Autodesk guys in here. I mean, you hear us as clients talking about, and as a reseller, I used to hear all this stuff too at the same time. But how does this stuff evolve on your side of the fence? I mean, you hear from users, that are talking about issues and problems and wants and needs, because everybody has a specific way they want to approach this. I mean, how do you guys address this kind of stuff when it comes in? I mean, what really drives you to make these changes? It's a tough question. Come on.
I'll take a stab at it. I mean, I think, this isn't, that question and that problem isn't unique to Autodesk or the AC industry, and it's a technology development thing. And I think that, you've got the whole mental model of sustaining innovations versus disruptive innovation. So every now and again, things like Revit come along that is a disruptive innovation, which ends up leading into more sustaining innovations, if you know what I mean, is the maturity on the S curve of technology. And I think that, that's one of the really difficult things to do is in any technology company is to how to pivot to introduce new things that are disruptive while maintaining a foot in the status quo and moving forward. So that's a major sort of hurdle to overcome. But the ultimate way you sort of answer that is listening to customers, listening to the market, looking for the signal in the noise, and then not necessarily. You guys all know the expression about faster horses and that kind of thing. You know what I mean? You've got to be mindful of when an incremental sustaining innovation sort of makes sense or when something more radical is needed. And it really comes down to talking to customers, understanding their workflow. A lot of people in Autodesk, particularly the product managers, like myself and Martin included, all came from practice, right? We've been out there, we've sat in design team meetings, we've been through the whole thing to know the kind of like the business pressures and the kind of practical, technical, and the legal kind of implications. And so having empathy for the customer and understanding where the market is at, understanding where the major cost savings, they're the things that's what you start with. And from there, you try new things and see what sticks and just iterate from there. And there's many mental models for that kind of thing. There's lots of great books on technology, and I'd say like any technology company, they're the paths that we follow. You know what I mean? We're not doing anything unusual in that regard.
Yeah. So and that's a good point. And the thing about it is that we as users and consumers of these products, we have the bad habit of trying too often to keep that foot in the past, right? We had that dependency, and so it winds up being a trade-off in what we need and what you guys can develop. And I think we're in the middle of this bridge, and this is where project information modeling really starts to come into the conversation now. And we've had some great talks about this in the past. And really, project information modeling is an expansion of a scope beyond just what you do within your own silo, right? And the first thing that we figured out very quickly as we started looking at moving beyond BIM into future workflows was just basically looking at our deliverables. What is it that we need to provide to be able to clearly communicate to the client what it is our design intent is and how is this supposed to be built? And so this was this ability to change this conversation, to change the deliverable now. And if you see up here, we've got some examples of just how our documents have altered, right? You remember the traditional 2D plan section elevation stuff in black and white. My God, don't show any color, right? We went through that for years, and we still have people that are doing that. But the deliverable has started to push this change, because there's a part in here that's about the graphics and the clarity of the intent and improved coordination and the focus on the overall project. But how does that drive us out of the silos that we're in right now? What are the things that are changing your deliverables and your requirements, and how are we moving ourselves forward as a team between the client and the development team to give more to the client than what we've done in the past? Chime in all at once.
Well,
I think
good.
I think one of the big impacts to design teams in this whole process is an example you've got here, the clarity of intent. It used to be when you were designing drafting boards, early CAD, you were pigeonholed into a specific task or deliverable. You may be the person that's doing all the details. You may be doing the schedules. You're the lettering guy. You're the hatch maker tapping your pencil on the drafting board. As we moved into these more improved applications, BIM applications, Revit, object-oriented things, the designers started to understand more about the project. So they weren't looking at things in one particular view direction. They weren't pigeonholed into one activity. They started to understand the complete design and see all the coordination that needs to go on in it. Right. So communication and coordination, huge improvement for our design teams.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think tools like BIM 360 have moved that a long way, because more and more those silos between the different design teams are starting to break down, because they're getting more real-time collaboration, coordination capabilities through cloud-based collaboration.
And it's round tripped. It's not
Exactly.
dead end.
Yeah,
we're not dead ending something into a visualization deliverable, but it's actually being improved and brought back into the stream.
Yeah, and one of the big things I see too is the engineer, the architect, and the drafter designer are different people, right? So I'm a professor up at SU, and one of my biggest campaigns is to fill the industry with architects and engineers that actually know architecture and engineering software, right? And that's what we're talking about here. So when you're marking up red lines and giving them to someone to enter these into the computer exactly the way I have it, and then make yellow marks on it with your highlighter and hand it back to me, that's not what this software really is meant for, right? So when that workflow is still being clung to like a life raft, it's going to continue to not work, right? So when people are, if you want to find deficiencies in the software and workflow, and if you're looking for them, you're going to find them. Right, there's no doubting that, but I find that once project managers, engineers, architects start doing their own modeling, they elbow people out. They don't. It's like, okay, I now can open a model and print my own stuff. Right. Step A. Step B. Go in there and put a note on that. Step C. Add something to the model. Right. So I don't know how someone can give away a design. Like, I don't know how someone could mark something and hand it to someone. And when Revit came along, it's like, yeah, this is how I have to work, right? And another way to convince people is client demand. It's like, you don't want to use Revit on this project? Well, guess what? It's part of our delivery. It's in our scope of work. We have to use this, or don't bid on the project. For me, that's been very helpful.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And again, going back to the Autodesk guys on this, I'm gonna pick on Tim here a little bit. You think about what we've done in deliverables in the past, right? The old paper document type stuff that we had to do. And I always like the plan and profile sheets that you had to put together. And I remember there's such an emphasis in Civil 3D that you've got to have that one drawing with all the tabs and all the model space viewports that go across. And then here comes InfraWorks, right? And the ability to look at that site and harvest data from public information, where I can bring in adjacent buildings and all that other good stuff. As we start looking at these deliverables change, where do you draw that line in product development to say, I'm going to carry this product to this point and then help us move to that next generation? Because I remember that transition from CAD to BIM was a big one. And now we're talking about expanding this universe to look beyond just what the paper documents are. So how do you handle that?
It's tricky. Just like Ian had mentioned, it's definitely a balancing act between going from like keeping people productive in the products and the workflows that they're using today versus trying to kind of bring everybody forward and make sure that they kind of they buy into the vision is a big deal. And so, we have a lot of customers, especially on the civil side, who, they're projects could take years. And so, I mean, they have to stick with a certain version of Civil 3D for years and years and years. And so, I mean, we still have plenty of people that are still using Civil 3D 2018, 2016. And it's just, it crushes my soul that we've come so far with Civil 3D since then. And we still have people that are still using 16, but we get it. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of communication to our customers about just kind of, we get it. You have to do your job the way that your project dictates and everything. But at the same time, just understand that we're doing our best to keep you productive and fix things and speed things up a little bit for you. But at the same time, we have to look ahead and we have to clearly communicate to those people that, like, here's the future, here's where we see it going, here's how good it's going to be. That it might take you a while to get there, but you'll get there and it'll be good.
Yeah, and it kind of follows the same lines on what Martin's been doing on fabrication. I mean, we always stopped our design at LOD 350, right? And so this continual communication of deliverable, how it's moving past what we've done with the design side into fabrication and construction and all those other things. I mean, you think about it. I mean, how big of a pain in the butt is it to help us move from what we do in design to prepare a model that can be used in a tool like what you have for fabrication? I mean, is this been such a process that it's easy for us to do, or how willing do you think the industry is going to be willing to accept this moving forward to where we deliver those models that he's talking about? We typically never did deliver. We didn't want to deliver them, right? So
yeah, I mean,
get over that objection.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes into kind of the value chain of, you know, the various stakeholders and so forth, right? I mean, because there is reluctance to share models, right? That's my IP. I might have something wrong in that. I don't want you to see my mistakes and those sorts of things. But on the other end of the spectrum, the value to a mechanical contractor of using the fabrication with elements within Revit, particularly sheet metal, is that thing can go directly to our cam duct product and be fabricated, be ready to start that process through the shop and sent out to the field without translation, right? In the design space, where it's like somebody else figures that out, where those are the people that are figuring it out and need to get that thing installed, and, you know, they need to make money on that process, so on and so forth. So, you know, in a lot of ways, you know, one of the things I always like to say is that, you know, historically these tools are used to capture the result of the design process. And really where we're trying to go with it is that they become that integral piece of the design process, right? That they're there to capture information even before you're ready to start physically modeling. You're capturing information that informs that design, that captures the information that leads you to making certain decisions. And then as a result of those decisions, then you start producing a model. And so that's, you know, a lot of what you see lately on the mechanical side and things that we have in progress on the electrical side are in that vein of information before model, if you will.
Right. So that kind of moves me into the last part of this that I wanted to cover in here and really start to open up the conversation about what we're really talking about. And, you know, I got invited to participate in the Water Resource Council for Autodesk. I actually had been involved with them through meetings at AU for probably 8 or 9 years now. And a couple of years ago, we got invited to a new committee, and I don't know how good the graphic is up here, but you can see there's a graphic about project information model. And Ian and Martin and I have had great conversations about, well, when do you talk about BIM and PIM? What are you talking about in the case of PIM in this case? And this is where, to me, as a company that's a multidisciplinary firm, is where we need to be right now. We need to start getting the rest of these silos torn down between all these different aspects of what we have that we use as design tools, but not just from the standpoint of the design tool. How do we move it into construction? How do we move it into the owner realm and their court for asset management and facilities management? And how do we break these things down? Because, you know, we talk about BIM really not being about buildings, but about the act of building something, right? The act of physically creating something. And so now what we're working on is we're actually figuring out how do we integrate all of this stuff from the horizontal design aspects and the vertical design aspects to put together a project information model that's all encompassing of everything that we do on the project. And you can see a lot of people get confused with BIM and they think that, like I said, about the building, these are some of the projects that we've done. I mean, you look at the rail maintenance facility yard that we worked on, huge project in there, but we do a lot of water treatment plants, right? And there's transmission lines and things that connect that. And there's also future looking things like this Uber Skyport project that we worked on here as a next generation of transportation and people moving to cut down on environmental issues by using, electric planes or whatever that they have to get people to other locations in a faster manner and do it more efficiently. And so we're taking all of these aspects and connecting them all together, and we're capturing all this information from BIM, from reality capture, from GIS, from the Internet of Things. We're gathering all this stuff together now. How do we get there? I mean, what are going to be the best ways for you as a company to help us move from BIM to project information modeling, where we have the whole picture in one house and do a better deliverable for the client that is more suitable to a full round trip? Because that's what the promise of BIM always was, right? How do we get there?
I mean, with me, it's the trepidation that you see is legally based, right? So when we talk about the shift in terms of responsibilities, the shift in workflow, but there's a shift in liability, right? So I'm, our lawyers are, they know about BIM. I think if there could be a reduction in liability in terms of, okay, this model is correct, then suddenly I get a call. Now I'm in the field wondering why these hangers are not in the right spot. You'd be surprised that slope you can slip down when it comes to a design firm like ours handing a model over to a construction firm and saying, go with it, right? So this is where it just starts at the very beginning. Like, what are the expectations at the beginning of this project? Right. And it needs to be a legal document that you are responsible for, right? So when we start handing these models around, I don't trust you, man. I don't trust you to take this model and run with it, because the thing is, I don't care how good people are at Revit, they're going to throw stuff in there. I admit it. I just told someone to throw some detail lines in the model. It was bad. I feel bad about it. I might lose some sleep tonight. However, it happens. It happens. So, I mean, to protect yourself legally, I think that's the biggest hang up in the industry, right? Because I do not want to go back to that job site,
I think there's a lot of truth to that. For years, the construction industry has been kind of an adversarial relationship between the different players. Everybody's trying to protect themselves, push blame off on someone else. And I remember, Paul Albin's in the audience. He'll remember this. Back in 2002, we were sent to London by Autodesk on a project that we were working on. And we sat in on a meeting with BF Lang Industries. They were the people that were coordinating the Heathrow Terminal 5 project. And that was our first exposure to what later was going to be called BIM. I don't know that BIM was really a thing back then, but that's really what they were doing. But they had developed their own process. But the key thing for them was the liability issue. And the way they resolved it was British Airport Authority brought everybody in under their umbrella, and they took on all liabilities. So everybody was basically playing on the same team.
It was all about setting that expectation correctly up front. I mean, you and Eric both hit on that point. This is all about setting the right expectation. I mean, how many of you guys actually tell your clients what you are doing when you're designing, right? Does anybody ever do that? Do you talk to them about the tools that you use, or you just kind of assume that they know what you're doing? And you look at the British Authority, they didn't assume, they took it under their umbrella to say, this is what we're going to do, right? Think about that for a second. I mean, if you're trying to evolve change to be all encompassing, what's the biggest mistake that we make? We don't communicate with each other about what we're trying to accomplish, right? Anybody else run across that? We started doing this with a lot of our clients right now. I'm more involved in business development than I ever have been. And one of the things I've started doing is going into our clients, especially our big municipalities, government agencies. They're the hardest ones because they're the ones that are the least likely to change and the least motivated to change, right? And so we started going into them and say, we have a solution that can help you, but it's going to require you to change how you do things, right? And it's not just an engineering solution, it's a technology solution, it's a communication solution, it's a management solution. How do you put all these pieces together to solve this problem of cutting down on errors and omissions, creating a more accurate model, a better coordinated model, and having fewer change orders that occur through the design process? So to me, it's all about that communication with the client, but it's also that relationship with the client. And I think that's the part that scares people the most. And so when we come to them saying that we're doing a project in Revit and they don't have awareness of it, then they get into trouble. And now we start talking to them about, I don't only want to do Revit, I want to do InfraWorks, right? And my buddy Eric Blackburn's out in the audience, and he was calling me out on this on the chat earlier about InfraWorks time together. I'm gonna pick on Tim again because he's the only guy close to InfraWorks here today. You know, me personally, I want to be able to bring in an InfraWorks model into Revit. So when I do my energy modeling and I'm working with Ian's products on how we're doing stuff, how do I integrate all this stuff together? And is Autodesk moving down that path for us? Is that what we're looking for? You know, those are the things I think that we really need to be talking about in this new world of a project information modeling environment. Anybody else have thoughts on that? I mean, where do you think we are?
I think a key to this is your second point there, the interconnectivity of systems and data. In project information modeling, you are bringing all the experts together, whether that expert is a business expert that is looking at the data coming out of the model in Power BI or Tableau and is able to make decisions based on that information. If you get the experts early into the project, looking at all of the data, you can start making those decisions earlier, speeding up your schedules and your timelines. So I like to focus on that part of it. And I would add another bullet point to the bottom and include analysis, because that data is a huge piece of everything that we're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's start wrapping this thing up. We're going to kind of hand it back.
We've had a couple questions come in. I've been trying to keep an eye on them as we've been going along. So actually, I want to say Catherine had a really interesting question. Is there any consensus on how the terms BIM, PIM, VDC, and digital twin are used? I often hear them used interchangeably, but I also get requests for, quote, 3D drawings.
Yeah, to me, it's, you know, I think marketing gets out ahead of this stuff.
Yeah.
I think everyone's quick to brand something. You model your stuff, you do a good job modeling it. That's it. Draw duct, don't have the pipe jamming through your duct, right? I know it's not as easy as that, but, you know, I mean, all these acronyms to me are the same thing. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing. I mean, we all get caught up in our world. You know, the funny thing about it, I hear digital twin right now. Guess what? We've been doing digital twins since 1983 when AutoCAD came out. Look at Sean Hurley's timeline. You want to know when digital twins started? Go back and look at Sean's timeline. That's when it started. When we got off the drafting board and started doing CAD, that's when digital twin really started. So it's a trend word right now. But again, we're trying to get the clients to think about it. And that's the hard part, is that communication of what we do in the design industry and what our clients understand that we're doing and how it benefits them. And I think that's the biggest problem that we come across, is getting that bridge and getting them out of their own silo as well too. What else you got up there?
Yeah, Danya asked, when you deliver a 3D model, do you deliver it without sheets, views, schedules, and the like, or do you deliver just your full set, your full model?
Depends on the contract and the legal risk involved.
As lawyers.
What the lawyers say we can do. We try to do a model, but we will take out seals and some items. It really depends on the client. It varies. I mean, some clients require us to do the full set. Some of us just want the 3D model, and so we'll strip one of those down and give it to them. But we also, this is a request of mine. I'd like to see the ability to watermark a lot of this stuff and do better ways to protect our IP. You know, and we use a lot of manufacturers' content too, and that's where the inventor and shrink wrap capabilities are really good. I'd like to see even some watermarking and protection that we can incorporate in that to help protect our vendors that are providing us with content.
I think it depends on who you're delivering to as well. Is it a stakeholder on the project and they have a higher level of trust? Is it an end user or a third-party consultant that we have no control over? a little bit less trust there. So maybe we
Yep.
strip out more in the model.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't avoid it.
Go ahead.
Snagging families. Good.
There's some really good discussion going on in the chat about, manufacturing families, and the content that they provide. I was wondering if we could maybe bring Catherine, if we could unmute Catherine. She had a lot of good points about family creation from a manufacturer's standpoint. I'd like to kind of get that discussion going too, if she's willing to do that.
Sure. And my main thing is just it's very difficult to know how to create a family of a piece of equipment when I don't know what standards I'm building to. Every firm has their own standards. Every nation has their own standards, what some people want or don't want as far as level of detail, level of design. And as you said, architects want one thing, engineers want something else, and at what stage they're putting the model in, like how detailed it should be. And we don't have the resources to maintain 12 sets of models for a single product.
Yeah. There's a couple of vendors I've been working with recently that started producing LOD 200 that they do in-house, and then they have a tool to add on the data, which is now the critical part in this whole project information modeling process. They would have a lower level of detail because what they manufacture in the field of manufacturing is not typically what we need in design, right? And typically it's not what the client needs in design. But the real difference to me is I need a representative model that at least shows me primary connection points. And I think most people in the design industry, that's what they're looking for when they're dealing with vendor specific content. I think what we get into trouble is when some vendors assume that we want specific data and push that on us when, especially in the Revit environment, if they do it with shared parameters, it creates chaos for us, right? The standard that's missing is the data standard. If we can figure out a way to come up with a better data standard and figure out how to push that along to all the vendors and have that work around, I think that's a bigger push for us. But I don't think most of us need, the big misconception is that I've got to have every nut, bolt, and screw that goes into a pump. And we don't need that. But the owner might. So it really depends on what the owner's looking for in that case.
In some places, it's not a misconception so much as that's the models they already have because
Right.
It's engineering models. And rather than create something from scratch for Revit, they just, bundle up the model from Inventor and pass it through. So you're getting just what they already have because the resources, again, to create in-house Revit content specific families is not always there.
Give me a step file. Give me an ADSK file. There's that universal format that we talk about.
The problem with that is you're getting a model from someone with a completely different intent for that piece of equipment, right? That they're internally on that piece of equipment. When you see that level of detail, it's like, I don't care. Does it fit in the hole with the doors open on it?
Yeah, in a hole.
So with me, I shy away from manufacturers' equipment. We're using Revit. It's parametric, right? First, A, does it fit in the hole? B, does it look at least close? C, okay, we're going to go back and model this thing really accurately. But if you don't start with A, I find you get into trouble. But you're getting stuff from someone who has a completely different intent for that piece of equipment than you have. That's my opinion.
All right, we're going to have to wrap it up here very shortly. Very quick question. This could be a short answer. Brian asked, what is your opinion? A project should be done as an MEP model or each discipline does their own model and links them together? What's your short answer, David?
I'm going to refer to Martin on this one because I've been asking him for interconnectivity between Revit models for years. I want to be able to connect an electrical system in one project to one in the other. This is an Autodesk request. We would love to have that feature. But right now we do both. On small projects, we do MEP. We've had projects where we do process and MEP in one model if we're creating the electrical circuits and systems and these things that have to be connected. But we've also moved beyond that on bigger projects. And so we have these dummy connectors that we put in place. It's not an ideal, it's not an elegant solution that we're looking for. But it's definitely
And prone to error too.
yeah, how do we change the housing of the data? That's a big PIM issue, is that we need to move the data out of the Revit models and out of the Inventor models and out of Civil 3D and InfraWorks and into a common shared database environment. Give us that. And I think that we're on the next step of owning the world, for crying out loud, because that's the real deal. That's what we're looking for.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to wrap up today's session with 2 final slides. If you are looking for other ways to connect and engage in the Autodesk community, we have a few resources for you. And Kate was so kind to put some of those links into the chat window. You can explore the various Autodesk communities, including the global network of user groups in the Autodesk Group Network, there you go, Ian. Our industry-focused communities, helping your colleagues solve business challenges together, the Autodesk forums, and stay connected with us on Twitter and Facebook, including several new Facebook groups for specific products. So thank you to David, to our panel, and to our Autodesk team members here today for all of you for attending our revitalized community conversations. We certainly welcome your feedback about your experience today. We'll be sending a post-session survey in the chat. Continue to stay connected in the Autodesk community, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you so much, everyone.
Awesome.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kim, for everything. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Bye-bye.